Awesome.
Okay, well, I don't think we have our new intro yet, but happy Wednesday evening, everybody. Welcome to Direct Line Live. My name is Jackie Saxtein, and I am solo tonight. We're still working through, we're on a new platform, so we're playing with the tech, and I'm joined tonight by Kate Sullivan, who has done some incredible work across the state of Maryland with election integrity, and we have a lot to discuss, and we're going to get into all of it. So, Kate, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been excited to be on. Thanks.
All right, so I think we are 49 days out from election day, right?
Drum
And
roll, please.
yeah, even
Let's hope it's
for,
only 49 days.
honestly, it's less, right? I mean, early voting has already started in several states, and it'll be
Yeah,
upon us sooner than I think that anyone's ready for in Maryland.
right. And mail-in ballots are September 23rd. They're mailed out on Monday. Everybody knows the election starts Monday.
Yep, game on. And Mark,
Yes.
looks like you made it.
Mark.
Yes,
So
I
nice
did.
of you to join us.
Yay!
Well, unfortunately, I needed a password that I didn't have.
Oh, like I said,
Who
new
knows?
platform, new problems, but
Yep.
show goes on. So, Kate, what have you been up to? I know you've been incredibly busy, and I know Mark is on the committee with you for election integrity in Maryland. What have you guys been up to over the past several months leading up to
Oh my gosh.
the
For the
monument?
past 3 years,
Yeah.
really, the past 3 years. So first of all, I represent hundreds of volunteers all across Maryland. It's not just me. We have an incredible team. They are so dedicated, and I hope to share some of those things this evening. But really, the election is upon us, and I think just to give your audience a little bit of background, roughly 3 years ago, we started getting very serious about collecting data to prove that our elections really weren't were not being run in the way that they should, and that honors our elections. So what that means is, when we were knocking on doors, there's several people that this happened to, and maybe even yourself, you can relate to this, knocking on doors, and we would recognize that the person that was supposed to be using the voter list was supposed to be at that door wasn't at that door. And it wasn't that person. When we would ask, that person would have died or that person would have moved. So that was sort of the moment where the light bulb went on and thought, we need to figure this out. And so what we started doing two things. We have empirical data, which is the actual scientifically randomized canvas that we ran across all 24 jurisdictions. And what that looked like was knocking on doors, totally random, nothing, not regarding party, socioeconomic status, geography. It was just all 24 jurisdictions represented, and asking, is this you? Do you live here? And we see that you voted in 2020. So we were actually looking at that metric, and we got data there. Then we also have the data team, and these are people who are computer scientists. Some of them work for NSA. These people specialize in identifying vulnerabilities, cybersecurity. So they've got. If we had to pay for them, we couldn't afford them, but they're dedicated patriots. So they were there taking the roles and identifying duplicate voters, deceased voters, people who are registered at a post office box, which is not allowed. So over the course of those two empirical and then of course quantitative data, we were able to come up with roughly 79,000 registration violations. Those are people on our rolls that are ineligible to vote because they are not registered properly. They are either a duplicate voter, or they are a moved voter, or they are a deceased voter, or they have some sort of mailing anomaly, like registered to a post office box or a commercial real estate. So we compiled that. We submitted our report to the Board of Election, did not hear back from them. We unfortunately then had to file a lawsuit because we're learning that they don't change things because we ask them to. We have to actually force them to. So litigation is in play, and I can talk about that a little bit later. But for now, what we are doing is we are laser focused on those 79,000 registration violations. We're watching them closely. As soon as those mail-in ballots go out on Monday, we are going to be watching when they are requested. If it is an ineligible registration requesting that ballot, we are going to be watching for that. We're going to be letting the boards of elections know, hey, someone from this registration just requested a ballot. So those are the kinds of things. And oh, by the way, 1,400 deceased voter records we just submitted yesterday to the State Board of Elections. So our team has been very busy. They are incredibly dedicated. I'm so proud to stand with them. And I think that with this upcoming election, we're just going to do our best to secure the vote by making sure that our voter rolls are clean and accurate.
One of the things that, let me just follow up on Kate. I mean, we have a MultiF Front War, and Kate has described the long term, which is to clean up the rolls. And Kate's heard some of my stories, but I've, found people who are, quote, over 100 years old, registered in my building. And then I found 20 plus years ago an obituary in the Washington Post, and it just had continued on. So these are the kinds of things that we have found. In the old days, when people showed up at the polls, it was a problem, but it wasn't as serious a problem as it is now with vote by mail, in that people who were in that inactive class had to show up at the voting place, and if they didn't, they couldn't vote. So there was something of a check there. Now, we can argue that at some point they're better off just pulling them off, but at least there was a check that those people had to show up at the voting place. That's out the window now with mail-in ballot.
Right.
So this is a long-winded way of saying one of the things that's really effective about what Kate's been doing with this litigation and highlighting the numbers that we've already identified. It is a big warning, I think, a big cautionary red flag, yellow flag, whatever, to anybody who would attempt to use some of these loose ballots that may have gotten sent around or have been identified that they have access because they're at the same address or what, they're the same family, whatever it is, that there's scrutiny going on. And if those ballots that we've identified by dead people, let me emphasize that, dead people,
5 of them voted in Baltimore.
Right. That there will be prosecution, that we've got them on notice. So that notice function is a really important part of what we're trying to do this fall to protect it. Now, that's not obviously the only thing. What we really want to do long term is to get these rolls cleaned up. But in the near term, it's a really valuable service, I think, to protect the vote this year, to keep many of those ballots that might have fallen into the wrong hands from tempting people to actually vote.
I mean, it would be so great to get what they did in Virginia over here and Texas.
I know they did. They had some nice laws and rules that were enforced by their governor, but that's not happening in Maryland. Something I like to say is, when we talk about 79,000 registration violations, of course, that's based on a snapshot. We actually think that number is probably a lot higher, probably closer to 200,000. If you really work out the data, but that again was just, we started with the registrations. We could absolutely prove end to end without a doubt, no daylight. There's no way they could wriggle out of, explain the registration violation away. But when I talk about 79,000 registration violations, I think it's important for the people in the audience who don't live and breathe this stuff, like perhaps the two of us at least do, Mark. A registration violation is not necessarily fraud. It may just be two people with a maiden name and their married name. It could absolutely be that. But what it is 79,000 opportunities for fraud. Okay. And I'll give you a data point that really gave us a lot of alarm. When we were doing the canvas, we came upon a data point that we didn't expect. And it was, it gave us pause. We knocked on the door. We said, we just want to confirm that you voted in 2020. And 20 people out of 383 people that we spoke to, 20 people told us, we didn't vote. I haven't voted in 20 years. Why am I listed as having voted? So even in just our randomized canvas, we came upon 20 people, which if you extrapolate that out, It's roughly 130,000 people in Maryland. If you were to extract, that's the purpose of the scientifically randomized canvas, is so we could extrapolate out reliably with a 95% reliability rate, those kinds of things. So we're looking at 130,000 potential people did not vote. And where do those votes come from? They come from a registration that's floating out there. I asked our audience to think of your registration as a chair, and it's like musical chairs. If you're sitting in that chair, nobody can use it. But if you aren't sitting in that chair, if you're dead or it's done, you live in Oregon now, criminals can take that registration and vote. And the importance of it being an empty chair is that it will not, in that very important board review, which, by the way, I think the boards of elections do a very good job. They do their best. They have board review. They review those provisional ballots and they look at, two people voted up. They bump up against each other. Is right. If you're dead, you're not going to have that bump up moment. You're going to be able to just vote comfortably with a perfectly good live registration that's some cases active, and you will not ever be discovered. So it is a victimless crime per se, in the sense that you will not ever, the victim's never going to point and say, hey, they stole my vote. So that is the importance of these. That is why it is there. It's literally constitutionally ordained that we must maintain the accuracy of our voter rolls. And that's why. That moment right there is why. Because we cannot have valid elections if we do not have accurate rolls. And that's the truth. It's uncomfortable. They don't like to hear it. It's a pain in the butt. But just because it's hard doesn't mean that we can just say, well, it's too hard. It's too hard. We can't maintain them. No, you have to keep taking it to the very, very end and be at the bare minimum, they should be curious about the data that we're presenting to them.
And I know Kate's very familiar with this. We're frequently, those of us who are advocates for basically more protective processes, are usually accused, aren't we, of trying to disenfranchise people who would otherwise be able to vote. And what we really need to kind of drive home the point on, because we have same-day registration in Maryland. So if perchance somebody who hadn't voted for years and years and years, or had moved, or whatever the circumstances were removed from the rolls and they wanted to vote, they'd be able to show up on election
Absolutely.
day, and they would vote provisionally, so the vote wouldn't necessarily go right into the system. But if a determination was made by the Board of Elections after the election that they were eligible to be registered, they would be eligible to be a registered voter, that vote would count. So there is not, again, the fear that somehow somebody's going to get disenfranchised because they're going to be somehow inadvertently removed.
It's nonsense.
It's just nonsense.
It's nonsense. It is. And I'll tell you what's not nonsense is dilution of vote. And dilution of vote is when a fraudulent vote is added into an election system. That dilutes all of the honest votes. And to me, that is a much greater threat. We know that's happening. There's never been any evidence that, in fact, quite to the contrary, the Board of Election bends themselves into pretzels to create access to voting, which I have no problem with. That's fine. I mean, I have a little problem with it because I think mail-in voting and drop boxes are a flagrant violation of chain of custody. I will stand by that to the day I die. It's absolutely ludicrous. Just because we do it doesn't mean that it's legal. It's totally illegal. We should eliminate them yesterday, those two processes. But that aside, given the fact that that is the law now and we're allowed to do those terrible choices that they made a couple years ago by starting mail-in and drop boxes, I have no problem with making sure that everyone has access to vote. And by the way, I mean, absentee voting is fine. I think military, you're disabled, you're infirm, you have a really good excuse. You have to write in and ask. I have no issue with that as a mail-in. But universal and with no reason whatsoever, just because you're lazy and didn't get a day off work, that I have no patience for. So I have no problem with access, but we should also be absolutely obsessed with accuracy, and that they don't care about. And unfortunately, we have much more evidence showing that we are inaccurate that our votes are being diluted, those 20 people that said they'd never voted before and somebody voted in their stead, that we actually have evidence for. I've never seen them produce evidence of someone not being able to vote for some godforsaken reason. If anything, there's just so many different ways to vote. It's ridiculous how many ways we have to vote in Maryland. But until we get rid of it,
long term, we'll let you, Jackie. We'll let you get a word in edgewise.
I've never been.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Maybe forgive me. I think Kate. Now I could go on to midnight on this.
Well, you have like several weeks of your mic not working to make up for. So
there you go. Thank you. So one of the things that I love to point out, and I want to make it now, and I make this to my Democratic friends, is that the vulnerability is probably greatest in primary. And when you think about, for better or for worse, so many of the elections in Maryland, both on the Republican side and in Democratic districts, are really settled in the primary. And so where you may have a jurisdiction that the electorate, because primary or only, Senate vote in the primary is going to be much smaller. The potential for mischief in a tightly contested primary is that much greater. Now, I'm probably more of an optimist than Kate is on this. So, Kate, you're going to have to live with this comment on mine. But I'm assuming that an incumbent delegate or senator is going to be less likely to get involved in mischief, if anything, because they're the incumbent and they figure that, they're going to get elected anyway or reelected anyway, whatever. The vulnerability is probably going to come to them from a challenger who, is willing to set up a system where they grab a lot of, basically take advantage of some of the vulnerabilities in the system. So I say this to my Democratic friends in the legislature, the porous nature or the vulnerability of the election rolls that we've encountered, that we're documenting, I really give Kate the credit for this, Kate and her team. This is something that they should be very worried about. That said, additionally, that the jurisdictions that are the weakest in terms of election administration, by any metric that you want to use, frankly, are more Democratic. And again, those are going to be places where those incumbent legislatures should be concerned that these vulnerabilities could be turned against them in a primary.
I think the bigger picture is that we cannot know who won our elections in Maryland and really across the United States. We have come very far afield from the idea that number of votes should equal number of voters. It's a very simple math. Anyone who's balanced a checkbook should be able to figure out that equation. And what has happened is people ask me all the time, it's the Democrats or it's the Republicans. The point is, I don't know. And, we met with a group of legislators and they wanted to sort of shy away from this idea of questioning the election. And I said, well, number one, we're not relitigating a past election. That has never been a concern of our team. We don't care about 2020 to the extent of relitigating 2020. However, I do think that there are lessons learned from 2020, which will help us secure future elections. Because if you cannot validate an election, then you don't have a valid election and you cannot certify. And that really is, I think, the biggest issue right now is that it's not about who won. It's about you not being able to prove that who everyone's saying won. You should be able to provably go back to the data and say, see, number of votes that they equal, and therefore the election is valid. And that is not what you can do in Maryland.
Well,
and I challenge, yes.
Well, and I think the argument can be made too from the Democratic side, where they keep saying, we've hired all these extra security people for the certification of the election, and if Trump loses, there's going to be another January 6th. And they're so obsessed with this idea that we need to restore faith in our elections that they should be so on board with every election integrity measure. If they are actually that concerned about stopping another January 6th or making sure that people accept the results, then they should be supporting every possible measure for people to feel like this election was fair and secure.
We could, so if you read the letter that we wrote to the State Board of Election, our ending paragraph was, we believe that this is when we outlined all of the registration violations, which they gave them in a beautiful report down to the very bit of data. Every single data point was delineated. And we said, this is your opportunity to take these claims, take this evidence, and have a conversation with us and have a conversation with the public saying, this group has identified these. This group was wrong and this is why, or this group was right, thank you very much, and we fixed it. It is a very simple, and that, by the way, that was a year and change ago. They would have had plenty of runway to be able to bring faith. You know, refreshing, I think the public would have found it, that the Board of Election took an honest look at this data that was presented to them, which by the way was airtight, and we could back up every single one. It would have been so refreshing for them to look at it and say, oh, well, wow, thank you very much. And I said to Jackie offline prior to the podcast beginning, there were 2 boards of elections that did exactly that. And you know what? Every single record that they verified, they came back to us and they said, wow, 100% of the records you submitted turned out to be true. Thank you very much. And what did you do? Because if I will speak for David Morseberger right now, he's the person that's leading the charge on this data, that, you know, sort of the data identification. He says it all the time, that it is not about the 79,000 or the 1,400 deceased voters. It's not about that. It's about the process that created them. We have to fix the process. We have so many ideas about what they could be doing better. And it doesn't involve throwing out everything they do. It's about augmenting the things that they do, using redundancy systems, using 2 separate teams to, I mean, I won't get into the technical parts of it, but I really, if there's a Board of Election person listening to us tonight, please, we have ideas that we would love to share that do not in any way involve throwing out their entire system. It's just some few simple things that we think our team does better than the Board of Election. I will say that out loud. We do. And I just wish so badly that they would listen to us, because it doesn't have to be a fight. We could work with them.
Let's talk. Obviously, we've talked about this as a battle on multiple fronts. There's the long game. There's the short game.
Yes.
And let's talk about the near term. So for somebody who's listening to this, who's concerned about elections, okay, this is a softball question. What can they do between now and election day?
I'm so glad you asked. Well, we have an incredible poll watching strategy that is underway. I really have to say it's been tremendous. So our goal is to recruit 1,000 poll watchers across all 24 jurisdictions. We are well on our way to that number. We have been offering training since mid-August. We started out with orientation, which shows the public all the different ways you can volunteer at an election. For example, being a canvasser, being an election judge, being a poll observer. So those are sort of the main areas where you can volunteer in an election. But what we really want is our volunteers to be incredibly engaged and very well trained and know what to look for. So our number one goal is to collect election judges. So we really need good election judges. And I'll tell you, probably the biggest reason we need election judges is what's happened in the past is some of the people that have volunteered to be election judge, they're not super engaged. They're kind of just phoning it in. And what we want are the people that have been so engaged with this process and so curious and so disheartened by what's been happening with our election, be involved in the process. And 2 things will happen. Number one, you'll be there and you'll be engaged and you can be part of the solution, because you're going to be making sure that the elections are run well. And also, I think it's going to help people understand the process more and maybe be a little more heartened. The boards of elections do a lot of things right. I don't think we talk enough about that. They do a lot of things right. And it's nice for people to, sometimes people call me and, Chicken Little, sky is falling. And I'll say to myself, like, I had a volunteer come up and say, do you know that they offered me $250 to be an election judge? And I said, well, they weren't bribing you. That's what you're supposed to be offering. They thought it was somehow there was like a nefarious plot. I was like, well, no, that's what you're supposed to do. So, some of it's misinformation, but when they're part of the process and they do the 3-hour training with the jurisdiction, it engages you and really helps you be a part of the process. And this election, I don't know about you, I'm going to want to be very distracted all day on November 5th. So if the election is giving you anxiety, I strongly recommend the antidote to that is to be an election judge. Well, you will be up from 5 a.m. until 10 p.m, and you will be engaged and busy and distracted, and you won't be worried about the election. So it's my big plug. But we have trainings every Thursday night, 7 p.m. It's the same training we run over and over again. We've got a nice little strategy. We'll help you place, we fill out a volunteer placement form, and we'll let you know which precincts need you the most. And we are connected with the boards of elections. They really appreciate it. We direct you there. Our trainings do not replace the official 3-hour training that every single volunteer must take in order to get the $250, et cetera. But we have, of course, a poll observer where we'll give you the poll observer certificate, which is different. But we can go through that in the training. If anyone in this audience would like to attend, the training is 40 minutes long. It's very easy. It's recorded if the time doesn't work for you. And we really would appreciate 1,000 poll watchers across Maryland would be a tremendous effort.
And we are also supporting that effort with a campaign for lawyers.
Yes.
Yes. I was talking to the Hogan campaign yesterday. I know has lawyers in every county or every jurisdiction and multiple lawyers
Wonderful,
available.
yes.
And
the MDGOP has been tremendous.
Yep. And I know, Mark, I know in previous years, you've also run a MDGOP hotline.
And independent of that. Okay.
Right. So we have a hotline. It's actually the same situation. Our poll watching is tied for the MDGOP hotline. There will be, all of our volunteers will be armed and ready with it. If they need to report something from as simple as a power outage at a polling precinct, or something that they see it might be a bit more egregious. Again, Hogan campaign has joined us for attorneys, and why that's important and really, really valuable to us is Hogan is the only candidate with statewide standing. Should anything escalate to to bigger litigation, it's very important. So it's great that the Hogan campaign has been a part of this. And our hotline is run by Zendesk, and they do a fabulous job, very user friendly. So, just some great attorneys and state party people that are going to be monitoring the line and giving those poll observers and election judges support. It's, election judges always think they can't call in, and they can. They absolutely can. If they see something like a chief election judge that's doing the wrong things, we should know about that. So it's a very supported strategy.
And I like to make the observation that it's useful even if you see something that you're not quite sure of, and maybe 70% it's okay, but 30% you're worried about. That's fine. Yeah. We love to see. We like to see those kinds of concerns because I'm a great believer that if people know that their eyes, that they're engaged, and somebody can call back and say, no, that wasn't a ballot, that was a sample ballot to somebody else, whatever the explanation is. I like to communicate the fact that we're paying attention, that we know what's going on. That I think has a real strong effect to keep bad things from happening.
It's funny you say that, because I know as a poll observer, I'm a central committee member, so I can't be an election judge. Breaks my heart. So, but I do notice that when I walk into a precinct, they just stand up a little bit straighter. They pay a little bit more attention. I really do think that there is value in being an observer for those reasons. Of course, I prefer election judge because you actually have a piece in the solution. But if you can't do that, and being an observer is more flexible, you can just do it on your lunch hour. But I will say, end of the day, if our training focuses on the number one issues that, actually top 10 issues to look for. So we try to triage that 3-hour training that's just overwhelming to people. We try to give them sort of the Cliff Note version of it. And we are always saying, end of the day, if you have to pick, that's the time we need people the most. The most unfortunate things happen at the end of the day. If they're going to happen, it's usually end of the day. And I would also say to the audience, the thing that I would appreciate everyone looking out for the most is, because it's something that's become a little fast and loose with the Board of Election, is the idea of what happens with the election materials at the end of the night. There has become a very bad habit of everybody being cozy with one another and trusting. And the election material, I cannot tell you how many, I observed 25, and I would say 10 out of the 25 I observed, the election judge at the end of the night drove off with all the election material in their own car. And I can tell you that's not allowed. And they had no idea. When we called them out on it, they said, this is how I've always done it. That's wrong. You have to have a Republican and a Democrat. Period. End of story. You have to be 2 people in the car. Election material is critical infrastructure. It's critical. You cannot treat it like it's the vote for the prom king and queen. You have to treat it with, reverence. And they don't, because they somewhere along the line, I don't know when, they decided that rule didn't count. But it is the law. It's part of election law that they must have a Democrat and a Republican in that car as you drive away with the election material. So that's the number one issue we look for, and we've seen violated all the time, unfortunately.
Go ahead, Mark.
No, go ahead, Jackie.
I was gonna say, scaling this up nationally, I think a lot of people, particularly at the presidential race level, are going to be looking at exactly the stuff that you're doing and looking to see if that's happening and I use Pennsylvania as the example because I think everyone's race to 270 goes right through Pennsylvania. Have you guys been in contact with other states and their election integrity efforts? And do you guys kind of share ideas?
Oh my gosh, yes. So something I probably should have said like 45 minutes ago is Secure the Vote MD is actually part of a national organization called United Sovereign Americans. It's actually the United Sovereign Americans is the one who created our litigation strategy. So we filed suit. We were the first state to file suit with United Sovereign Americans. They are a co-plaintiff of ours. And so we filed suit, but now we have 9 other lawsuits all across the United States with the idea that ultimately will end up in the Supreme Court. So the issues we are trying to address for Maryland will actually apply all across all 50 states. So it's very important that we have filed mirrored across 9 other states and climbing. So that is something that, we've been sharing lots of data. These are doing the same things we're doing. They're canvassing their data, they're identifying records, same strategy in those, and actually it's 32 other states, but 9 of them have actually filed. And then of course we have the poll watching, which is also, they have an issue reporting hotline, just sharing how, what the issues may be, because we have to keep track of the issues that are happening because they could become evidence in these lawsuits.
No, I know Kate's very familiar with this, but independent of sort of the separate or the sort of non-party effort that the litigation that she's described, the RNC has been very involved in these issues. Ancient history, they had been prohibited because of a consent decree from getting involved in election integrity issues. So it really requires sort of independent organizations to do that. That's no longer the case. And so that's allowed for the party to be that much more focused on it. For example, tomorrow night on Capitol Hill, staff lawyers who work on the Hill are being invited to participate in an outreach effort to do election integrity. Those people will be farmed out. We hope Maryland gets its share of that, but many of them may well end up, frankly, being deployed to other states to participate. Yeah. But the party has been able to be a lot more involved and has designed some really good systems to be able to be that much more effective. And they've also been involved in some of the independent litigation separate from the litigation that that Kate described.
Yes, the RNC was very supportive of another lawsuit that we were a part of. Some people may remember that they changed the oath. The Board of Election changed the oath, which made, when you order lists to be able to campaign or knock on doors or verify the rolls, which is our constitutional right, they made it a penalty if you were investigating, this air quotes, investigating the rolls. So we fought back on that. We filed a lawsuit, and right now we're in the motion for summary judgment stage, and we don't have an answer on that yet, but I think we will prevail in that case, only because everyone else that has filed that lawsuit has prevailed. It's such an egregious loss. I mean, it's kind of interesting that they even are trying to do it, because it's so obvious that they can't tell us that we can't investigate. That's ridiculous. It's our constitutional right. So, but there's a lot of things about this administration that are blown away. No constitutional rights. So,
yeah. I mean, Mark.
So we will be watching, and we will be watching. We will be watching in other states. It's a bit of a challenge too, because of course we have resources that we need to deploy here in Maryland. One of the things that we are sensitive of doing is that we want to make sure that we have appropriate coverage in areas that have more challenges. And that may, of course, involve some folks who serve in counties other than their home county. And so we're appropriate. We're looking to be able to do that.
Yeah, something that's really helpful to know, if anyone, you absolutely can work in another county. You can be an election judge or a poll observer in another county. The only caveat is if you're going to be an election judge, you must be trained in that jurisdiction in order to work in that jurisdiction. So the time to decide is now. I live in Baltimore County, but let's say I wanted to work in Baltimore City. I would need to contact the Baltimore City Board of Election, be trained there, do the 3-hour training there, and that's where I will serve. So you can't decide on election day that you want to be in that area. You have to sort of think ahead. But we strongly recommend the most important jurisdictions off the top of my head. We've identified Baltimore County, Baltimore City, Frederick County, Washington County, Montgomery, and PG. So those are the jurisdictions where we really need good election judges. They're big counties, they're active counties, and they just need those really civically engaged volunteers. The other counties, it's not that they don't have issues, it's just that they have a pretty engaged citizenry. So these people have been election judges for 25 years, that kind of thing. Prince George's County is the one that struggles the most. They really are always short on judges. So anyone listening from PG County, by chance, please volunteer to be an election judge. All right, I strongly recommend that county, or travel across state lines and county lines and be a PG County election judge. That would be very helpful. And if anyone, yes, go ahead.
No, keep going.
I was going to say, if anyone wants to learn more about that, you can email citizenvoter2024@gmail.com. We will give you all the tools and give you the resources and the training, et cetera, and point you in the right direction at the bare minimum. But for sure, we would love to help out the citizens of Maryland get involved in this upcoming election.
So kind of as we near towards the end of the show, I wanted to see if there's anything else you want to make sure that we cover before we go into the plugs that Mark and I have to do.
Oh, gosh. Well, if anyone wants to check out our litigation or our data or the poll watching strategy, reach us in any way, we have a website. It's securethevotemd.com.
I covered.
And you are cutting out, but what I was also going to say is the most important thing, with our we've got this well outlined environment that our elections are in play and the voter rolls are not ideal right now. But the last thing I want anybody to feel is defeated, because the best way to protect your vote is to vote. And I can't say that enough. the best way to protect your vote is to vote. It's that musical chair analogy I said in the beginning of the broadcast. You must vote. That is the best way to protect your vote. And I will also say that the best way to make sure we are overwhelming any potential cheating is to overwhelm the polls, because you can't have 130% voter turnout. It has to, if they can cheat just fine, but they won't be able to cheat if it's not believable. It needs to be believable. So the best way to protect ourselves against that is to overwhelm the polls. Please grab 5 people that you know and make sure they vote. Knock on doors, get out that vote. I can say that is a wonderful strategy to make sure that we have a robust and secure election.
Well, and I also want to mention, I believe it was passed last session in Annapolis, which I think probably one of the most ridiculous things that was passed, is that if you show up to vote and somebody has already cast a ballot in your name, that they're just going to take the first one, and that's the one that they're going to count.
Yes.
So if ever there was a reason to encourage going to vote early, that is the reason for that. If you get there first, nobody can take your vote away from you. So get out to vote early. Early voting starts. Do you know off the top of your head? Because I do not. I wish I did. I should.
Yes. It's October 24th, early vote, October 24th through 31st. But remember, the mail-ins are out this Monday, September 23rd. So request your ballot. Our guidance has been all along, request your ballot, vote by mail using a mail-in ballot, but do not under any circumstances ever put that ballot in the mail. Do not put it in a drop box. Get in your car and vote with a mail-in ballot and drop it off at the Board of Election. That is our strong recommendation. Do not ever put a ballot in the mail. It is not secure.
And ballot harvesting in Maryland is legal. So for whatever reason, you cannot get it to your house. You need a volunteer to come and pick it up for you and take it. Reach out to Kate, reach out to me, reach out to Mark. Please. Somebody will come and get your ballot for you if you cannot get there yourself.
Yes.
So another opportunity, we do want to mention the Get Out to Vote rally that's coming up in Frederick on the 19th of October. It's at 5112 Pegasus Court, Suite F, Frederick, which is where the Frederick Victory office is. But while, it's certainly the federal candidates are heavily promoted there, because obviously this is a federal year for us. All candidates are welcome to come and participate. It's at 10 a.m. The whole thing kicks off.
Great. That sounds great.
And I'm going to switch my hats for a second and take a second to plug the Maryland Young Republican Christmas Gala. We finally launched it last night. Lord help me, it is December 20th, 5 days before Christmas. I'm going to have a coronary. But so if you're not traveling for the holidays, please buy a ticket. It's one of our major fundraisers of the year. It's going to be wonderful. I'm upholding the pledge I made when I ran for chair, and there will be no chicken. We will never serve chicken at a single event that I am in charge of. Last year, we served pork belly and short ribs. So it's going to be a great time. We're hosting Carroll County this year at the Links at Chaladon. Tickets are available on our social media, or reach out to me, and we hope you can make it. And the Montgomery County Republican Club is having their holiday party on December 8th from 1 to 3 p.m. And I believe we're probably doing Toys for Tots again for that. So please bring an unwrapped toy with you so that we can get those to kids who, especially in a year where everything is more expensive, might not otherwise be able to enjoy a toy this Christmas. And I think
it's very organized so far in advance.
Yeah. Well, one last opportunity is, at some point in the future, we all need to go to Masoni's in Baltimore County, and have a wonderful Italian dinner there, and support a wonderful Republican family, the Masoni family.
I wonder if they do the Feast of the Seven Fishes around Christmas. Let's do that. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching. And Kate, thank you so much for imparting your wisdom on us and sharing all of your information. I'm sure we'll have you back closer to the election, or maybe right after, to debrief how things went. And we will be back next week with another guest. Have a great night, everybody.